STEM4US, and my tie's a little crooked, and we're on live stream, so I'll just tighten it up there. We're very, very glad that we are here with a distinguished panel of outstanding leaders from across the country to discuss a very important conversation that needs to be discussed, and that's a conversation concerning our educational well-being, both from the context of students as well as the educators that are tasked with educating them, and whether or not that well-being is best served by having our students remote or having students in the classrooms, or perhaps having a bifurcation of those formats. And so today we have a distinguished panel of both educators as well as business leaders and even health experts to guide us in this debate or conversation. We have, and I will go around and introduce everybody. We have Sanford Williams from the Manassas City Public Schools. He's the board president there. We have also Christopher Hart, who's currently a board member of the Lowell Independent School here in Washington, D.C., as well as the chairman of the Washington Metro Safety Board, which is chaired, he chairs, and it's responsible for ensuring the safety of the public transit system in the metropolitan Washington area. He formerly served as the chairman of the NTSB. We also have Dr. Renaisa Anthony, a public health expert, and also we have Kim Cherry, another expert who is formerly with the DC Public Schools, who served as their deputy chief of the STEM department, and now serves as the regional partnership manager for the Association of Supervision and Curriculum and Development, which supports schools districts in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and international schools. So we have a really robust conversation waiting for you. We also are want to hopefully be welcoming a couple additional panelists before the conversation is done. But let me go ahead now and turn over to Kim Cherry, and I wanted to say that first of all, Kim, we're grateful for you deciding to make time to lead this, and we're really, quite frankly, blessed on this occasion, which many are celebrating around the world, the beginning of the holy month of Hajj. So I want to definitely give a shout out to all our brothers and sisters who are in Mecca and other places around the world observing that. But without any further ado, Kim, why don't you take it away?
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all. A little bit of electrical. I'm going to turn it down a bit. Is that a little bit better? Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I think, as Talib said, we will have an exciting program and a robust conversation about what folks are thinking in terms of returning back to school. But before we get into our question, I would just like to go around the room and have people introduce themselves, where they're coming from, and what brings you here tonight to engage in this conversation. We can start with you, Dr. Anthony.
I'm still getting used to doing these Zoom-like conversations. Dr. Renaisa Anthony, I'm a physician by training, public health practitioner by passion, and also the founder of Momentum MD and Momentum Park. And I was invited to this conversation to really share that public health perspective and answer any medical questions related to COVID and children returning back to school.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We appreciate you taking the time. And we also appreciate your work. So thank you very much. Mr. Hart, from Lowell, could you introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to this space this evening?
Yes. Good day, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to have this opportunity. I have a couple of reasons that it's a privilege to be here. One is that my daughter is a rising senior at Sidwell Friends School in DC, and so they're looking at, and in fact, they just announced what their plans are for the fall. So I have that plus the school that she used to go to, which is Lowell School. I'm on the board of trustees of that school as well. So I have that personal engagement. In addition to that, I have a long-standing career background involving safety, mostly transportation safety. As you heard Talib mention, I'm former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board and currently the chairman of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission that oversees the safety of the Washington subway system, which of course is facing itself issues about social spacing on the trains, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you for including me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think the perspective of the parent is super important. So thank you for your time and energy. And Mr. Williams, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. First, thanks, Talib, and thank you, Mr. Burnett, for being the moderator. It's a pleasure to be here. Dr. Anthony and Mr. Hart, I look forward to having some lively discussion. I am here, I think, because I'm the chairman of the Manassas City School Board in Manassas, Virginia. We've been working on how to get kids back in school. We made a decision 2 weeks ago about what we're doing going forward, which is going 100% virtual to start off. Personally, I am married to a physician, Dr. Anastasia Williams. She's a pediatrician. We've been married for 32 years this year, and she's very passionate about her patients and what she's doing. Our son is also a pediatrician in New York City at Columbia, so he's been dealing with COVID a lot. He and his wife is a physician as well in New York, so I've had that connection. And then school-wise, my other kids are grown. My oldest daughter's in LA, Los Angeles, as an attorney, and my youngest is actually a fourth-year rising student at University of Virginia. So she's going back to UVA, so I'd had that concern about what UVA is going to do. But this is a very important topic, and I look forward to contributing in any way that I can.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. I feel like you have a ton of milestones right there. So Thank you for joining us this evening. And so when we sat down and we talked about the questions that we wanted to present to you all tonight, we really wanted to focus on a few things, right? So we know that we currently live in this space of assessment-driven instruction, right? Like everything is based on students taking a test, right? Or a milestone that they accomplished this or they accomplished that. And so now we're in this totally different space. And so how do you think that this remote instruction will impact the educational progress of our children? Because we now have different types of assessment to monitor progress. So really, I just want to start with your thoughts about how do we monitor it in this new space? And anyone can go.
Well, I can jump in here. When we in Manassas were looking at other school districts about what to do, we looked at a variety of things. In terms of the effect and impact, I think there's definitely a deleterious effect on the social and emotional learning impact on students, and definitely affecting their growth. I mean, students are not going to grow as much and learn as much when they're learning virtually. So we definitely are looking at that and trying to balance that with virtual learning. But the hard problem that we have is that we know that even though virtual learning can work, there are going to be issues. And then how do you mentioned measuring those issues? In Virginia, the standard of learnings which we use to measure children's progress has been halted for now. But when we get back into a regular space, I'm sure those tests are going to show, the children's growth has been stunted. It's hard to measure, and I don't really see how you practically can measure their growth in a virtual environment. So you make a great point, and it's going to be a challenge for us going forward if this lasts for a long period of time.
Yes, thank you for that. I think also now we see that school is not just about learning content, that school has so many other important aspects And so, Dr. Anthony, I want to talk to you a little bit about those other important aspects around schooling that's not related to content, but that are super important, right? So what are your thoughts about how do we measure the progress of our children outside of content, right?
Right. So we've never been here before. And what I'm seeing, and we've all seen across the world, and that inspires me, is the creativity and innovation. And we probably, like, I'm not expecting the world to ever go back how it was. In fact, I think that teachers, people like Mr. Hart and Mr. Williams, people around the world have found creative ways to do things differently. So I think it's hard to assess at this time exactly what we're going to do, and that is an evolution. The one thing I do want to talk about is the resilience of children. And so even our kids now, when we look at our teens, our millennials, people who are much younger than us, the way they do the world, the way they interact with the world is very different. So if we're trying to apply a model that worked for us when we were in school, then it's not going to work. But the reality is that these children are adaptable, they're resilient, and I have faith that however we decide to do it, it will match what their needs are as they move forward in the world of a pandemic and post-COVID.
Thank you very much. I want to move on to the next question because I want to start with Mr. Hart, and particularly with having children in the K-12 space. How are you thinking about whether we start school in January or maybe next summer? How are families and parents thinking about sending their children back to school?
Well, that's a very good question and a very difficult question because it depends so much on the individual circumstances of the people involved. So start with the parents. Can the parents, if the kids are at home, can the parents stay home? And what does that do to their ability to earn a living? Are they teleworking or are they out of work, or just what's the story? Or do they have to be physically someplace else at work? And if that's the case, then how are they going to accommodate the whole idea of having to be at home? So my daughter faces a different perspective, which is as a rising senior, she's starting to look at colleges. So we were going to use her spring break to go visit some of the colleges that she's thinking of going to, but of course that didn't happen. So now we're going through the whole thing about will the SAT happen or will the SAT not happen? And what will the schools be doing next fall? Not this fall, but in another year, what will they be doing? And meanwhile, how are their admissions processes working? So we've got it from that perspective. I also really feel for people who are athletes and who depend on athletics to get scholarships to go to college, and now the fall season is going to be canceled in most places. And so there's the viewpoint of the athletes who will not have that opportunity to show off their wares to be able to get scholarships. So there's some, and then of course there's the teacher's viewpoint and the staff viewpoint at school. What, do they want to be there? Are they willing to be subjected to, the possibility of problems like the public health workers, like the healthcare workers are doing in the hospitals? And so there's so many perspectives that come into that picture that as we already heard, we're in a place we've never been before. This is unprecedented. We're figuring it out as we go, and we're going to just have to stay tuned. Every day, new information comes out. We have to look at what the CDC says, Centers for Disease Control, and that has changed. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that because we're learning new things every day. So that changes. And then there's the local school district, and what are they doing? What's happening in your state? Are you in one of the spike states? And so there's so many variables that have to be looked at that this is going to be a challenge any way you slice it for everybody that's in this picture: parents, students, teachers, staff, you name it. Everybody's going to have to make some very difficult decisions.
And you touched on a point about the resources. And so we have some families who have the luxury of working from home and a lot of folks that do not. We have some families who have the luxury of devices as well as internet. So when we think about those resources, when we think about the training and the time that teachers and administration has put into sort of like their career, what are your thoughts about reallocation of those resources to support families? And I would like to hear from everyone regarding that matter.
Well, I can start on that one since I just spoke. This is age related because the older kids at Sidwell already each have their own laptop, so that's not such an issue for them, and they're living in DC, so most of them have good internet access as well. But that's not always the case, and so if you're in kindergarten, are you going to have your own laptop? And if you're living in the boondocks and you don't have internet access, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant whether you have your own laptop or not. So it really is. It depends on the circumstances, and it depends on your age.
And I'll chime in. This is from a public health standpoint. Really, when we talk about those social determinants of health and those inequities and health disparities and health inequities, this is where we're going to see it, and that gap probably widen. Mm-hmm. We know here in Silicon Valley, and that's why it's so bright behind me, because I'm way on the Pacific Coast. But the reality is, like, some of the wealthier families out here, especially in Northern California, they work from home anyway, so it was very easy for them to transition, and then that created, of course, other problems. But many of them could outsource teaching. Many other people that I work with and know, they have these educational pods where they're paying out of pocket for their children to be with teachers. And so this is, again, this unprecedented time is creating all these different opportunities for innovation. There are teachers whose schools have closed. And so they've started their own little pods where they're accepting students 5 at a time, and parents are paying out of pocket anywhere from $30 to $80 an hour. And you can imagine the acceleration that these students are going to have, and they're safe. They have the social distancing. But the reality for majority of America and people who are not earning 6 figures, and the average family that now that we have gone this far through this pandemic are really questioning their own resources. School offers a lot more than just education, especially for many of our kids. It can be a place where they may only get their meal of the day or 2 meals of the day. It may also be the only place that they can get healthcare. It may also be the only place that is safe. And for many children that I think about and that keep me awake at night are those students where it may be the only place that they're shown love. So when we think about this issue, as the adults, as the people who are responsible for these populations, it really is going to come down to a district, school, principal, staff, the advocate for the students that you serve, because each situation is so different.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was some great information. And this pandemic has truly exposed a resource gap and a technology gap. There's something schools can help. So for instance, in Renaisa City, where I am, we have 85% students of color, about 65 to 70% of students are on free and reduced lunch. So I worry about them getting food. But in terms of technology, specifically to address what you asked, even though each of our students has a tablet or has a computer, we have a 1-to-1 student to device ratio, which is great. All of them don't have access to quality internet.
Right.
We can help with the tablets and with kids getting Chromebooks, but we cannot help with the access, except for hot Wi-Fi spots or hotspots. I think the general problem is, and I work at the FCC as well, so I'm very, very into communications, obviously. Nationwide, we need to be committed to having broadband being ubiquitous for everybody, because we cannot function as a society close to being on an equal footing, equal level, until everyone has access to broadband. Because if you have a device, and I think you both mentioned this, if you can't get on the internet, then what good is it? So we as a nation need to commit to that. And those resources are not down at the school level. Those resources have to come from the federal and state level, because they have the funds to do that, and we just don't. And those things do affect, like Dr. Anthony mentioned, the health of students, their emotional health, and other things that flow from that. So we definitely need to address this, the technology part of it, and not just the device part, but the access part, because the access part is very important. And what I like to tell folks in my FCC work is I personally view broadband like electricity. It's a necessity, and we need to conscientiously make a concerted effort as a nation to make sure everyone is connected, because we need it all over.
Right. Thank you all very much. And so you have sparked my next question around policy. Like, as Mr. Hart said, like, this is all new, right? Dr. Anthony, like, we've never been in this space. Like, how do we think differently? How do we help policymakers think differently? One, school is not just about content. That's clear. It's about the health of children. It's about the safety of children. It's about having that social, emotional support. So one, how do we think about policies that help us think differently about school and education? That's one. And then my follow-up question is, like, how do we then support, like, how it looks when we have, whether, students are going back to school 2 days or they're spending all their time at home. And Mr. Williams did speak on it a bit in terms of the broadband, like ensuring that everyone has it. But what else would you think that schools or education would need, particularly when you have folks at home, or you have special, very privileged families who can afford, 5 students, so we or think about policies differently?
You sent me.
And anyone can begin. And thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
I just asked a question about how do we think differently about educational policy, particularly around supporting whether students are going back to school 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week, and if they're spending more time at home. Like, how do we inform educational policy since things have changed so dramatically?
I think the biggest problem that I see, and I heard this on a conversation today, is that our policies are too broad. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what was said before I came on. And if I repeat something, forgive me. We got a little bad weather here. I'll take the policies that has been given to us here in Alabama. The governor set out a no mask. Then she said, you must wear a mask. Then the state superintendent said, I'll leave school opening up to the local school system. Well, right now, I think it's maybe 50-50, I read. So we have educators not liking the policy for their district, and it's the unknown. I read something that someone sent me from a student, and the students are even wondering if the buildings would be safe for them to go back, because most of the time it's hard to keep a building safe and clean. When I say safe, clean in normal days, because students will go in, they'll use the restroom, they come out. If there's not an attendant in there to immediately clean up behind them, then the restroom is not clean. So we're talking about more staff, more cleaning supplies, and the policy does not address how often these things will happen, how often the classrooms will be clean, how often any of the sanitizing will be done in these buildings. And the fear of one teacher he sent me was, I have an elderly grandmother here in my home. I may have to find an apartment to keep from making her sick because he has to go to work. So the policies are so bland, and I'm hope I'm answering your question. The policies are so bland from the top, from Washington, D.C. to the state, to the locals. Members all over the United States are saying the same thing. How are we going to keep safe?
Right. No, you answered
How
the
are we
question.
going to stay healthy? How,
Mm.
huh?
I said you answered the
I'm
question. No, thank you.
Okay.
You're in a
That's the
little
problem
delay.
that we're having.
Mhm.
Okay. And
The point you made about
where
the
we
building,
are with the
Yeah.
policy.
the point you made about the building is a serious one because I'm at a school which has several buildings, and the buildings are different. So they have different HVAC systems. They have different widths in their hallways. They have different stairway widths, and I can't imagine what Mr. Williams must be going through because he's in a whole school district, and he's got old schools, new schools, medium age schools, and they have to all be different too. So it's not only a local decision. It actually comes down to some of the specifics of the buildings that you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
And it's really going to come down to risk mitigation. So you can't completely eradicate the risk unless, as we talked before, you have significant resources and you can outsource someone to come and educate your child. And that is happening and concerns me about our other children that will be left behind. But the risk mitigation is what's important. Shout out to one of my cousins who's like my sister. She's a principal in Flint, Michigan, and she had to deal with years ago, of course, the water crisis. They're still dealing with the water crisis. And now they're dealing with this pandemic, and students are expected to go back physically to the classroom. But under her leadership, she is prepared for will probably get shut down. So it's time to create that infrastructure so that if that is the case or that decision has to be made, that they can quickly go to a virtual platform. Now, the resources, I want to answer a little bit about that policy question, is that at the federal level, there's just no way to be able to anticipate what each individual district needs. But as quickly as they deployed resources to create this vaccine and to all these private companies, as they quickly deployed those dollars to $1 million companies, it's so important to make sure that there's funding that reaches those levels so that people like my sister cousin who knows her students, she knows what their risks are. She knows what else they need beyond just the book knowledge. And she is I call them very, I say high potential students in low resource areas. Those children, her school is their respite. That's their safety place. That's where they get their food. That's where they get their education. That's where they get love sometimes. And so the resources and what she's doing, she's working as a leader with her educators to make sure that they're taking care of their students. And I just implore every educator out there to call your leadership to the table, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for our children, and we cannot wait for the government. We cannot wait for our governors. We cannot wait for our supervisors to do it. If they're not doing it, call them to the table. But we have the power within our own institutions to know our students. We know them best, and to leverage those resources to make sure that we keep them safe.
Yes, thank you.
And I was going to jump in. Great points for everybody. I love what Dr. Anthony said about deploying resources. Your zip code should not be your destiny. And in this society, too frequently, because of where we live, that kind of dictates the resources we get and how our kids achieve. And it's like, a vicious circle. In terms of policy specific, I have a couple things. One, I think in order to get policies both at the local, federal, and state level that impact students in a positive way, and our staff as well, we need to, in this instance, in this pandemic, kind of collaborate, benchmark things, find out what works best, which doesn't work. So at least while we're in this virtual space, we can do the best we can do with the resources we have. And in terms of getting policies changed at the state and federal level, I think the best way is to tell our stories. And Dr. Anthony this may resonate with her, but I know my wife and my son were both pediatricians tell me that they hear a lot from obviously their colleagues and from their patients. And one thing that really strikes me is that from their patients and from their colleagues to an extent, how they perceive things is dictated by the stories they hear. Too often folks, even who work in the same space, because they have different environments and different realities, they look at things differently. My wife tells me that the African-American pediatricians that she works with generally have a different perspective on this whole COVID thing in terms of how it impacts schools than some of the Caucasian physicians and pediatricians she works with, which to me is mind-boggling. You think that they come from the same space, they have the same education, they have patients, they would think the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But too often, everyone doesn't hear the same stories. I think getting our stories out there of all our communities will help. But at the end of the day, in terms of in this space, making things the best they are, we do need more resources. And like if the federal government can give millions of dollars to folks who have private airplane companies, they can give it to schools. How we treat the least of those in our society is how we should be judged. And we're not doing a very good job right now.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think the policy pieces are going to be super important as we move forward, particularly if we have to shut down again, right? And so if we find ourselves in this space again, whether it's November, December, or even February, I think it'll be very challenging. One, as an educator myself, I'm not trained or not highly skilled or trained in the areas of remote or virtual learning. And so when we think about policies, I would like to hear your thoughts on how do we educate our educators who have not had a lot of time and or opportunity to grow as a remote or virtual learning teacher? Like, or are there other spaces that which policy can be rerouted so that the professional learning, the professional development can improve so that our the education can get sort of a bit better, right? Because a lot of folks don't have that training. So your thoughts or your thinking around one, if we have to close again, and then two, how do we think differently about supporting the teachers and administration in these school buildings? Like, how do we ensure that they have all the tools and skills that they need in order to ensure learning?
That's going to be a very iffy proposition in a lot of ways. And you mentioned one of the big additional uncertainties that we haven't talked about, and that is the time factor. We don't know. We have no clue how long this is going to last. And every day the situation changes. So not only is it dynamic, but it's the duration of it is uncertain. So at this point, I don't see anybody going to take formal classes on how a new way of teaching, but there are lots of resources out there that, I mean, I'm looking at resources pretty much 2 or 3 times a week that help me in my decision-making capacity as a trustee at Lowell. I'm looking at resources on all kinds of issues that I'm going to have, that I'm not an expert on either, and I'm going to have to bone up on in order to make a reasoned decision on where to go next. So my suggestion is to go to the internet and find some resources, and there will be resources to teach teachers. I have to think I haven't looked at them myself, but just there are resources to tell you what kind of HVAC systems you need, what filters do you need, what sort of mask do you need, and all those kinds of things. And what are your policies on testing students every day when they come to school, and et cetera, et cetera. There are resources out there on that, and I have to think there are probably some resources that help in a very interim way train teachers how to respond to this new reality.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I know that from our school system, we do have professional development where our teachers are currently learning different strategies and means to teach by virtual learning. The fact that we had to close down and do this in the spring definitely will help inform our efforts for the upcoming school year. And one thing to remember is that virtual learning isn't totally new. It's been going on for a while in some colleges and other spaces, not to mention elementary and the K-12 space, elementary school, secondary school, but it has been going on. And I do know that I've talked to a number of the teachers in our district who have concertedly made an effort to take the lessons they learned from this spring, to take courses, to do professional development, to talk to other teachers around the country, to learn ways they can interact with with their students. And I've seen a lot of teachers do a lot of creative things, which has heartened me, which will definitely help them be the best teachers they can be in this current environment.
Thank you. President Tucker or Dr. Anthony?
This goes back to the importance of the deployment of the resources and making sure that they filter down to the local level and even the district level. Because again, if you look at a school like the Sidwell School, those teachers know how to use virtual and they use a lot of different technology there. And then there are other schools in different zip codes, which I love when you say the zip codes shouldn't dictate your destiny. In zip codes where teachers don't even get the luxury to just deal with technology, they again have to deal with a lot of social determinants with their students. But making sure that those resources are there, so it's not a one size fits all, but a one size fits our population and the needs of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. President Tucker, would you like to contribute?
Can you repeat the question again? I can't hear.
Oh, okay. I was asking about the potential resources. Yes, potential resources for professional learning for teachers around remote and virtual learning.
So I think the question was, and we got a little bad weather here, but I think the question was around professional learning or getting the professional development that we
Yes.
need for our educators.
Yes.
They're really afraid that they are not prepared. And I think if they had the chance just to concentrate on doing one set of lesson plans and perfecting them, they would be okay. Such as if they know that they're going to do virtual, they can concentrate on doing virtual from 8 to 3 every day, come up with a schedule and perfect it. The problem last year was trying to do virtual and trying to do the classroom at the same time, because some educators had to actually go back into the schools and do some work in the schools, even though they were told they didn't have to. So perfecting it. If I'm not incorrect, here in Alabama, and I'm not sure if any other school systems in other states have it, but we have what you call Schoology. So now the educators, with their professional development, they only got a few weeks to learn how to do Schoology. We can't keep reinventing the wheel for learning at the last minute. If this was something that our educators needed to learn, then we should have been working on that before August, before the end of July. So our educators are professionals and they like to practice before they actually get out there. Yes, they got through the year last year with the professional learning that they had already. No one showed them how to transition from the classroom to the internet. They just did it, but it was stressful. So the professional learning part for our educators we need time to learn our craft, just like anyone else. We're practicing as we learn. And that's not what most educators do. Educators like to go in the classroom, know what they're doing so that they'll be able to teach their students. So if I heard the question right, for it's our professional learning, our educators are going to do it. They're going to do it, but they just need more time. Honestly, they do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for letting us know about the weather and your internet. I think you're just a little bit delayed, but thank you very much for your response. We heard the entire response, so thank you very much for that. I heard all of you talk about resources, and I heard you talk about funding. And so previously, before COVID, schools were working on how do we ensure that we have the appropriate amount of books and materials and learning tools. Now, when we're talking about like safety, and we're talking about students working from both home as well as school, how do we think about the resources in terms of support of sort of like the health concerns in school, but then the materials at home, right? That's question number one. And then the second part is, as we are thinking differently about schools and having parents to become the primary educator, like what could pay look like for parents who could potentially be unemployed because they're staying home with children? So again, I'm talking about resources. One is sort of like the health and safety if we have to go back to school. And then the other part of that is the instructional materials if they have to stay at home beyond having a device. And then thinking about sort of like the pay scale for parents if they can't work, or if they are unemployed and have to stay home to homeschool. So I'm really talking about resources on two fronts here. So your thoughts?
Hello. Again, this comes back to these public health challenges, and we're very highly educated people on this call. It's a luxury for us to even spend an hour and a half having this conversation. And so again, those parents who cannot homeschool their children, the ones who are most likely to be suffering from unemployment and an inability to get a job, will not have the resources and skills to adequately teach their children where they will be competitive. So again, as we start to think about this space, some of these questions are really hard to answer because we don't know what it's going to require. Are those innovators, those disruptors? And we've seen so many places in different sectors that have been disrupted, but in a positive way. So as we always do these things, I'm looking forward to how education is disrupted in a positive way. And the one thing I want to make sure that we don't forget about, especially those who have a responsibility in this sector of education, mine's in medicine and public health, but if that's your responsibility, to keep on the table and to not forget about those disparities and making sure that those gaps don't exist between those high potential, low resource students and their parents, and those who, whether there was an educational system or not, just the safety net that they have with their families that they were born into, that they're going to have a very different outcome.
Well, speaking from the school's perspective, certainly the schools will need more resources for a number of reasons, even if they're not full. And most of the schools probably, as I'm hearing the way things are developing, most of the schools probably won't be full and may not have anybody at school. But even if they do have a few people at school, they're going to need resources to employ the people that are there. And those people are going to now be doing more cleaning than they ever did before. So they need additional resources for that. But so the schools, no matter how you slice it, are going to need additional resources. And in the case of an independent school, which relies on tuition paid by the parents, they may not be getting all of that either. So there are lots of reasons why the schools are going to certainly need more resources to get through this.
I am curious from the panelist, your thoughts on that part of the question about paying parents. Something I've heard, but I haven't thought of myself because I'm not a parent of a child that's in school yet.
Well, twofold. First, to answer the first part of the question, the health and safety resources at the schools will definitely be needed. I know for us, like most school systems, 90-something% of our money comes from our state government and local government combined. So in order to get the PPE we need, and in order to do other things like extra cleaning and what have you, most school systems will need money from the state, federal, and local governments. But in terms of Dr. Anthony's question, that was a great point. I think that where we have not done a good job in our nation, in America, with this pandemic is the countries who have been most successful have decided, and I want to say off the top of my head, maybe like Finland, some other European nations, to pay folks the money they were making their jobs, no matter what. So they've guaranteed pretty much 70, 80, 90% varying amounts of their salary, which is kind of in essence paying parents to stay home, but recognizing that parents can't do what they need to do for their families unless they're getting paid. So I think that I'm not sure how we would structure it, pay people per the number of child, but we definitely need to have something in place like we did with the current unemployment, which gave a $60 bonus weekly to folks to make sure parents can pay to take care of their kids, because all parents can't, I can work at home, but all parents cannot do that. And that's, again, gets back to telling our stories, because I think a lot of people don't really realize in power that everybody can't just telecommute and work at home and, do the 9 to 5 and talk on the phone and, go to the computer and have internet access and do what they need to do. So I do think it's something we need to evaluate. Again, I don't know if it would be the forms of direct payments, but we need to do something to recognize that a good part of our country cannot, if the kids aren't in school, stay home with their children and also take care of their families.
Yeah, and I think it is, for those of us who are working from home, we are working. So in addition to working full time and being the educator and being the cook, and still, it is a lot on individuals, even for families, when there's a two-parent household or multi-adult. It is very demanding because you do want the best for your child, right? You still want to give them the education that they deserve. But like you said, Mr. Williams, we still got to eat, right? We still have to pay the bills. And so I think these are very tough, yet real questions that we need to address. I don't think we don't have the luxury to wait or to, we'll figure it out eventually. I think this is eventually. And it is time for us to really ask those extremely difficult questions of ourselves, and then sort of broader in terms of our educational policy. I am running a little over time in sort of like my moments. I was supposed to ask about 3 minutes ago, your final thoughts. And so really your thoughts about one, schools reopening, two, all of the components that we really need to think about in order for this to be successful, the things that we must have, and what are some things that we will have to let go as we think differently. So really just your final thoughts. And anyone can begin.
My final thought is that we're going to have to get creative about this unprecedented situation, and we meaning the government, hasn't done that yet. It didn't stop us from having this problem when we knew it was coming, as some other governments have done much more successfully. And now that we've got this problem, it's been exacerbated by the economic problem, which the only remedy for that is going to have to be the government is going to have to step up to the plate and get creative and bring some serious resources in a way it's never done before, in order to try to get us out of this, some able to in someday reach back to some sense of normalcy once this becomes more normal. I can't even begin to wonder imagine what they did in 1918 when they didn't know what a virus was, and they didn't know what was causing it. They didn't know what to do about it, and meanwhile, that virus was killing people all over the world too. I can't even imagine. But so far, as Mr. Williams said, we have not stepped up to the plate yet on this, and we're clearly going to have to. And it can't be, these variations on the political theme, like wearing a mask means you don't support Trump. I mean, the virus doesn't care about your politics. So the politics is the person whose dying breath was, "Oh, I made a mistake. It's not a hoax." Wow. So we're going to have to wake up to this new reality and get creative and respond to this, or else it's going to take us down.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
I'll continue off that thought. This is a new reality and a new frontier. And the lessons being learned is that we can't look backwards. There are things and lessons we can take from the past, but really this is about looking forward and disrupting, innovating, and looking at how do we transform education so that the bottom line that our students are educated, that they have the skills that they need, and the skills as we move into the rest of this century really are around technology, really are, I'm going to bring it back to the whole purpose of this call, is really rooted in STEM. And so making sure that our students still have that access so that they can compete, so that they can live in this new frontier, which will not be ours. And so I am excited to see the creativity. I'm excited to see even some of the college students and how they come up with the ideas of what's going to work and how that trickles down to our younger students. Times will never be like they were before, but it doesn't mean they're going to be worse. I'm really excited to see how they're going to be better and what comes out of it. These are exciting times.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Great comments. My final thoughts, I guess, for the moment, is something that I closed out my last school board meeting with when we made a decision a couple of weeks ago to go 100% virtual. And first, before I told a story, before I get to the story, there's a quote that I saw today because I was looking at a lot of John Lewis quotes. And one of his quotes was that ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime or maybe even many lifetimes. And each one of us and every generation must do our part. And that's how we're going to get past this, by working together to do our part. And then the story that I told was about my wife, and I'll be quick. I mentioned she's a pediatrician. She sees patients now via telehealth on the computer or also in her office. So she does both, like a lot of physicians are doing now. And she loves her patients. She loves her job. And I asked her, I guess it was like a month ago, what she missed the most about not going to work every day and seeing her patients all the time. And she said that she missed seeing her patients in person and she missed giving them hugs because that's just who she is. And then she told me a story about an elementary school patient she had who was strictly instructed when she went in that she could not hug Dr. Williams because you're not supposed to hug people and touch people in this environment because of the virus. So she had folks go into the room and do their thing, and then she went into the room with the family, and the child dutifully was sitting there on the table, but then the child saw my wife and they couldn't resist. They jumped off the table, the child, and she gave my wife a big, huge hug and would not let go. And of course, the way my wife thinks, she said thoughts of COVID were running through her head. I can't be hugging this child. What's going on? But she said that she relaxed and then she just reveled in the genuine love and affection she had from that child who had not seen another adult outside her family in months and just needed help from their favorite doctor. And that brought home to her and then to me, talking about the story, that our kids need to be in person. They need to learn in person. They need to socialize. They need love. They need interaction and affection. But we have to balance that with the fact that their lives and our educators' lives are not expendable. So we need to work together the best we can to get the kids back to school in person as fast as we can. But we need to do it safely. So we need to come together, not listen to garbage, listen to science, and try to do the best we can for our kids and our community.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Williams. President Tucker, do you have any final thoughts? I can't hear you.
Can't hear you. So
You can hear me now?
Oh yeah, now we can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
On Sunday, I heard a student speak about how her life changed in March and how much she missed her friend. Just to listen to a student talk about how the pandemic had been for me. And my words to her was, get their phone number. Because you finish high school, at some point, you will be getting back together for what we call class reunion. And you can make up that time as long as we stay safe for now. The issue is everyone is afraid and they want to live. The students are better than we can because we know the fear of getting sick and not getting well again. Whereas they look and that social emotional connection. They need that. However, we want them safe. We want our seasoned teachers safe. We want our seasoned educators safe. However, the children really don't know the danger that they could be in if we get together. In my closing, I read something that said the small children would not be required to wear a mask. Those are the ones that like and feel the most. That's an issue because we got to take care of them because they don't know any better. So my thoughts are we want to go back to school, but we want to go back when it's safe. There are monies, there are grants being given to schools, but right now they got to apply for them. We should have had that money in place before we begin to talk about sending children back to school. So my concerns are for everyone because when school is ill, there's a possibility that your community is going to be ill also, and it will spread. So my last word is wear your mask and let's stay safe.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to all of you this evening, or Dr. Anthony, for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts and taking the time to engage in conversations around this issue of returning back to school, educational policy, resourcing, support for teachers, support for parents. So I think it is a very complicated space that we're currently in. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us this evening. So I'm going to pass it over to Talib, who will wrap us up for the evening.
Well, I really am grateful for this virtual platform conversation. We had folks who were trying to actually provide feedback via the internet in terms of the platforms that we were using, which were both Facebook and YouTube. And some of them were college students who were, and I'll go ahead and just ask the panelists before they wrap up, is what can you say for the college students? What are the ways that they can protect themselves, because while it seems to me that some school systems such as DCPS, which I want to congratulate DCPS for making the right decision, the mayor here, Mario Bowser, and I think that the Washington Teachers Union should be commended for its work in advocating for schools to continue to be remote and safe for both our parents, our teachers, and our students. But the question that I have is, how about the colleges, that some of them, particularly in Virginia, where you're located, Sanford, are, again, going to be opening up fully? What should our colleges, and particularly the students who are going to be going there, as well as the faculty, and I'm a former faculty member at a historically Black college in Maryland, what should both students and faculty members do if they're confronted with, the fact that they may have to go back into these buildings? And what are your thoughts about that before we wrap up, as a way of conveying the question that was on YouTube?
I can specifically talk about the University of Virginia because my daughter is a rising fourth year there, and I'm also on the board of the University of Virginia Physicians Group Hospital. So we've dealt with that issue as well. I know one thing that we're doing at UVA is requiring that all students take a test before they come back. Problem with that is resources, and I wish we could do that for everyone. And that's, again, disparity of resources, but they're providing tests for each student to take before they come back. And then once they're home, they have to quarantine for 14 days before they come down to Charlottesville to grounds, or to campus. We call them grounds down there. So I think having folks tested beforehand and then quarantining before they come to school and then getting to school is a great way to go. But there's a couple issues with all colleges. All colleges don't have the resources to send out each of their students COVID tests, and all students can't necessarily quarantine for 2 weeks. Everyone lives in different environments. And then even more so, once students get back on their campuses, a big problem is, our college students really going to socially distance and do what they need to do to ensure that they don't spread the virus? I pray and think that all students around the country would do that, but I think we know that even students who have good intentions, it's not going to happen. They've had football teams who have gone back. Clemson comes to mind, where over 30 football players, contracted it, and other football teams have had that same issue. So hopefully we can do the best that we can, and that students who are going back will do their best to follow protocols and quarantine and stay safe. But someone mentioned earlier, the virus doesn't care who you are. So, I'm hopeful that we can go back on colleges and do that, but we'll see what happens.
And and you mentioned the idea again about the testing when they come back on campus. But if you're going in the classroom on day one, you may not, let's say, have COVID, but how about day two? And how do you then, if one person contracts the disease, let's say either a student gets the disease and they were in class with other people, how do you basically then notify those people who are in class and cause them to quarantine? And how does that disrupt the the semester? And how about if the teacher again gets gets the virus? Again, I'm a former faculty member on an HBCU small campus. I could imagine myself taking over and subbing for one class, but having to take the entire semester because a teacher is out because they were exposed to some students in their class who had COVID. It could be unimaginable. And imagine that rippling. Not to being one professor facing that type of challenge, but a whole stream of professors. What are you all's thoughts, again, about just the whole cost? On one hand, it's a cost benefit if you assume that remote learning is not as valuable as in-person learning. Then the question is are the benefits of in-person learning going to be vastly greater than the risks, the financial risks and the human risks, particularly for college campuses? If everybody can maybe take a crack at that before we wrap up.
I'm confident that Americans are smart, creative people, and will figure out. To me, the question is not whether we'll figure it out, but when we'll figure it out. And just as we saw teams that started up and then stopped, I know it's not so easy to start and stop a school, but I'll given today's trends, I don't know what I'd be able to say about this next week or even tomorrow, but given today's trends, I will be very surprised if very many schools are actually going to have in-person teaching by the fall. So I think we will figure it out. It's not a question of whether, it's a question of when.
Well, Dr. Anthony,
I don't know if Dr. Anthony was going to respond. I didn't want to jump in front of her.
No, please go. I'm happy to follow after you if I'm even needed.
Okay. I was going to say that one thing that I know that they're doing at University of Virginia is that for larger classes, they're not meeting in person. It's just smaller classes that are meeting in person, and then they're supposed to wear masks and be distanced. Something I heard, which I have not followed up upon, but which I thought was a great idea. I think Morehouse and Spelman, if I'm not mistaken, because my sister and brother-in-law went there, and I think I heard through one of their networks that they were having their first-year students, their freshman students, come in for the first semester, then so at least they have a college experience, and then having the seniors come in for the second semester. I haven't verified that, but I think I heard that this past weekend. And something like that would be a great idea, because what you're doing is you're still doing some in-person learning and giving folks the exposure that they need, but you're not exposing needlessly or in an unsafe manner everybody to everyone at the same time. So I think there are ways we can be creative to do things, but we have to be creative and we have to be safe, and we have to balance those two things. And your point about money is very important. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but money can bring back a life. So we need to balance the resources and the money part with the value of human life, and human life is paramount. So we need to find a way to figure it out.
So college campuses, as you know, I've taught at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I've taught at George Washington University. I'm out here adjunct at Berkeley. So the remote piece is probably the easiest to deploy and to be even more creative in the college space. I just call her my niece. She's going back to Michigan State, and I know that they've made it where students, all their classes are virtual at this time, but they're going back to campus. They don't have roommates. You get your own room. So again, each place, this is the true randomized control trial, because there are people who will choose to go and stay on campus. There are students that will choose to be home. There are students that are going to have in-person. There are students that are going to have virtual, and the data will come out. And that's the last piece I would like to share, is that it's really important because this really is experimental. And that's the unfortunate part, that we're sending our students and our children and even us on a daily basis. We are part of a large social experiment. It's important to collect the data. It's important to learn quickly. And out here in Silicon Valley, they say fail fast, pivot, and make new decisions. And that's what it's going to take for us to get this right. There's no one right answer. We just have to learn and make sure that we're learning as we go. Evidence-based, wise.
Sure. President Tucker, do you have thoughts on that? For some reason, I don't think we can hear President Tucker. I know she was having some issues with her phone. Well, until she comes back, let me just say that these are all questions that STEM4US is having to challenge ourselves to come up with solutions about, and that's one of the reasons why it is important and critical for I believe parents, particularly those focusing on trying to develop STEM ready and cybersecurity ready students, as well as those people who are interested in young people interested in going into those cybersecurity fields, to really be able to step up. It's almost like a scene from the Hunger Games. And in this, as you may remember, it was a competition between those who were going to literally, stay alive in order to be able to get the prize at the end. And I believe that that's what we're facing. The kind of way in which students approached education and the way in which parents approach education and even teachers approach education in the past, as was stated by Dr. Anthony, I believe is going to have to be totally revamped. We have to have again, a major pivot, every one of us, in order for us to survive not only the pandemic of COVID, but I think as it's been made crystal clear that we need to end the pandemic of racism as well. And I believe that it is not, as many talked about, we've been doing a lot of conversation about COVID, but we still have not done enough conversation about ending racism, not just, weathering the storm or making, getting some inoculation. I believe that the entire country would be better served by, again, having us, have racism be something that we talked about as a thing of the past. And I believe that we can get there. I think that President Tucker is back on. Let me just yield the floor to President Tucker before making the closing remarks. President Tucker.
Thank you. There's a STEM program in Bessemer, Alabama, on 4th Avenue in Bessemer, Alabama. That zip code is 35022. And I saw that they are offering to the parents assistance to assist with their children with technology, which is like a plus. And I think that's what we're going to need. I don't know if it's so much as one versus the other. And I know that that's going to be what most parents need is assistance. Also, as for the college, I'm looking at on social media the different things the colleges are doing to try to help. I talked to a college student yesterday. I provided her with some face masks, and she's excited about going back. So she has her own room. She don't have a roommate. And our prayers would be that she stays safe. Her mother and grandmother felt that this is the thing she needs to do. And our parents are in a different place than the educators are. Even though her mother is a school counselor, she feels that it's a safe place for her child to be. So we have our thoughts about it, and we know that we want them in a safe place. But our students' mindset is to go and complete this task that they have started. And the only thing that I think that I can do to help them is to provide some of those items they need to stay safe. And going to the college campus, providing Clorox so they can keep their rooms clean, and face masks or whatever they need just to help them stay healthy. And those were my thoughts.
Well, I really appreciate that. And again, I am also reflective as you talk about, the idea that some people just in their heart feel that they may need to take a risk in order to achieve a certain level of comfort. And I was recognizing or reflecting on that as I looked at the mountain in Arabia, where you had thousands of people assembled to kind of retract the steps of the prophet Abraham and that pilgrimage to Mecca, and many of them were not masked, although in later stages I saw that they were. But so again, just definitely there are people who are going to take a risk, and I, like you, say that my prayers go out to them. Literally, my prayers go out for them who are going to be placed in that situation. And I'm also, and I think we as a nation need to be very creative about what was stated earlier, in that some say on Capitol Hill that we don't need to pay people to stay at home. I believe that now is a time to pay people to stay at home, particularly if they are going to be engaged with raising our children in terms of engaging with them as really the teacher's assistants. Every parent now who's in a situation where they're doing remote education is going to have to be charged with being an assistant, because that child is not going to have, really, most of them, the level of attention to be able to remain engaged without assistance. So we need, I would say, for all of our federal leaders and policymakers to be thinking about, keeping this $600 unemployment benefit and making it available to every, particularly parent, and also to our college students who are not able to get internships but need money to pay for their tuition. So again, these types of benefits, $600 at least, I believe is a great $600 a week is a great thing to do, especially for those who have been looking at the economy and seeing again a kind of hollowing out of small businesses, particularly which are the engine for the economy. When these small businesses are closing their doors, you don't have, again, surplus jobs. So again, for people on Capitol Hill to say we don't need to pay people now to stay at home because there, again, people who have jobs that are not being filled, I think are, totally blind. They're blind to data, as Dr. Anthony said. And, you can talk about philosophy all you want, but I'm also of the mindset that let the numbers be the guide. And if the numbers say that there are not jobs, then allow the government to step in to, again, assist those people who need money just to survive. And I only need to look at the crime rates that are happening across our country, in Chicago and New York, and other places across this country. Again, would it not be, again, that there was a commercial on Comcast that talked about how, the house has become the gym, it's become the school, it's become the restaurant. And there was also kind of an illusion that the house has also become the police station. Well, that is the truth, because parents are now, again, being put in the position where they're having to monitor their children, and I believe if they do, we will see some of the significant drops in crime like we saw right when the pandemic first was encountered, and there was a mass order for people to stay off the streets. That's when you began to see, again, the crime rates go down, because all the parents were inside and they were policing their children. Well, again, if we had funds to support that, that would be a good thing. And I believe that $600 a month is a small price, $600 a week is a small price for, again, a reduction in crime. So these are the types of things that are currently being debated right now. And STEM4US felt that it was important and imperative to have that conversation. And we ask that you support us by going to STEM4US.org or sending us an email at TALIB@STEM4US, STEM4US.org. But I want to just, again, close by just saying how grateful we are to our panelists for, again, taking the time that they had to join us. This is, again, a conversation that could not be had without Sherry Tucker, the president of the Alabama Education Association, or Sanford Williams, the president of the Renaisa City School Board, or Cherry Burnett, the regional partnership manager for the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, or Christopher Hart of Hart Solutions, and chairman of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission, former chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, and current board member of the Lowell School in Washington, D.C. Again, this conversation, and of course, Dr. Renaisa Anthony, a adjunct professor at Berkeley College and a physician and public health expert. Again, we could not have this type of conversation and have the depth of analysis without these experts. So again, we want to give a warm virtual round of applause to each and every one of you. And we pray that you all remain safe and that our public health leaders are listening to this conversation and they take into the consideration the very sound advice that has been given today, and that we will, as was stated earlier, we will innovate a way to make sure that our children are both being educated and that the educators and the parents and staff are all being kept safe and sound. So without any further ado, we look forward to having another conversation next month. Stay tuned to STEM4US on YouTube and feel free to share this conversation. Again, we wish you all a good night, and thank again everybody who joined the conversation.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you for having us.
Panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.